Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Weor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of hundreds available as free downloads, podcasts, or transcriptions. Our lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. We invite you to browse our library of lectures to find teachings that suit you. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live and includes a free online classroom allowing listeners to see images, read related scriptures, and ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate, visit gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is a service of Glorian Publishing, a non-profit organization. The lectures and radio broadcast have been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Most spiritual schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. To make a donation, visit gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
In recent lectures, we have been describing for you one of the most important symbols of Buddhism, called the Bhavachakra, which means the Wheel of Becoming. And it's commonly called the Wheel of Samsara, which is a bit of a misnomer, which we explained 2 lectures ago in the lecture Bhavachakra. Today we want to go deeper into our own personal experience of this wheel, the Bhavachakra, or Wheel of Becoming, specifically in relation to how this phenomena of nature affects our moment-to-moment experience. The Bhavachakra is not a teaching of mere theory. It is a teaching that points out to us exactly why we suffer. And that knowledge reveals to us how we can stop suffering. And so that underscores its importance. In these times that we are experiencing the wheel of becoming moving in a very profound way. Suffering in this era is quite strong. And we've all been witness in recent weeks of many tragic events where the suffering of humanity seems to be intensifying. And it's important for us to understand why. Not merely to curse God or to live in fear, but instead to understand the principles that are involved, the cause and effect relationship of all things, and through that to know how to change. So this teaching is not something that's merely interesting to think about or something to discuss. It is something that can make a profound impact in your life and in the lives of those that you come in contact with, if you put these principles into practice. So the Bhavachakra, or the Wheel of Becoming, represents for us a fundamental axiom of nature, which commonly nowadays is just called evolution, but that's only one half of the equation. Everything in nature is subject to evolution and devolution, a cycle, a circle, and that's what the wheel represents. And this is why Samael Aun Weor stated that the laws of evolution and devolution of life constitute the mechanical axis of all nature. This wheel represents this function. Everything that is born evolves, is sustained because of cause and effect, and then declines and dies. There is no exception in the manifested worlds. Nothing is accepted from this law, except that which is unmanifest, that which is the absolute. So everything in manifestation is subject to birth, being sustained, and dying. The universe itself is subject to this law. And every existing thing, all the way down to the very smallest, most microscopic existing element, into the very atoms and the quanta. This wheel demonstrates that. It represents that. So we ourselves are subject to that law. Evolution and devolution. We are not an exception to the law. And yet, we forget. And as I mentioned previously, this is represented in the 10th arcanum of the Tree of Life, which shows a wheel with two beings managing the flux of that energy and matter and consciousness as it evolves and devolves in nature. The 10th arcanum is called retribution. Retribution here is the equivalent of the term in physics, invariance, which means that all things must be balanced and restored. This is not a law of punishment, but instead a law of balance. Evolution and devolution balance energy and matter and consciousness. They restore equilibrium. They keep things functioning. When we create a disequilibrium, nature restores the balance. And that's why it's called retribution. To return, to restore. That's what this word really means. So, in Sanskrit, we call this samsara. And as we explained in the previous lectures, this word samsara means circling, to repeat, to recur, to occur again and again. It is how nature processes energy. We see that in even the most minute physical details of nature. The gross, from the gross to the microscopic. We see seasons that repeat. We see day and night. We see growth and death. The repetition of how life creates, sustains, and destroys. Everything is managed by this. Spiritually speaking, this law is also in complete control of everything. Everything is repeating and circling. Unless there's a strong influence on the function of the wheel does not stop. It continues to turn. So spiritually speaking, we are all in samsara, circling. Physically, psychologically, spiritually. Circling, repeating. And to change that requires incredible energy and precise knowledge. So today we're going to examine some of the factors that affect that. And as I pointed out in the previous two lectures, Padmasambhava pointed out that samsara, or circling, is to spin from one place to another, and nirvana is to have cut through this circling. So let me reemphasize, nirvana firstly means cessation, extinction, ending, to cut. We think of nirvana as a place. And it's only a place in the context of psychology, a state of being, a state of consciousness. A being only exists in nirvana because their consciousness is established in a place in which it cuts samsara in itself. It is free of samsara in itself. What this means, samsara and nirvana in this context should be understood in this way. It has nothing to do with physicality. It has nothing to do with dimensions, with heavens and hells. It has to do with one's state of being. We are in samsara because our state of being is one in which we repeat. We are asleep, identified, subject to craving, aversion, and ignorance. We don't see reality. We repeat our desires, our fears. We repetitiously pursue our pride and lust and envy, and feed and nourish our anger and fear. We do not cut through appearances, cut through our ego, cut through our mechanical habits, physically and psychologically, in order to perceive reality. We perceive illusions that we propagate. We are in samsara because we've created that in ourselves psychologically. Thus, we live in samsara, whether we are in a physical body or not. Where we abide in the universes is driven by our state of being, not physicality. We exist in one body or another because of our state of being. And that's why when we study the scriptures, we find the tree of life, which represents levels of matter and energy and consciousness. But its primary function is to reveal to us the infinite potential of consciousness. The infinite potential for its expression, but also for its conditioning. This tree of life represents the world outside of us and the world inside of us. We tend to think of heaven and hell and the physical world only in terms of outside, concrete, materialistic. We think of heaven as something above our heads that's very vaporous and vague and light, and hell is something under our feet that's full of fire or ice. Those places exist, but our relationship with them is not determined by our beliefs. The clothes we wear is determined by our state of being. In other words, whether we have a physical body or not, our state of being determines the level in which we experience life. If we are ruled in any given moment by a negative emotion, we are in hell in that moment. When anger takes over your psychology, you become angry. Everything you perceive is filtered through anger. Everything. You see everyone else only in relation with that anger. Everyone is to blame. No one understands me. I will have my revenge at any cost. This is anger. Anger abides in hell. Anger is a demonic quality. When you are conditioned by your anger, you are in samsara in a very deep way, circling, conditioned in hell. This is true whether you have a physical body or you don't, whether you're in your physical body or out of it, dreaming or dead. Really, the physicality is irrelevant. What matters is your state of being. The same is true of lust, envy, pride, fear. But conversely, the virtues have a similar effect on us. When we really experience the beauty of cognizant, conscious generosity, when we truly give of ourselves to someone else and expect nothing in return as an expression of love, we experience that lightness of being, the beauty of the heart that's inflamed with virtue. And in that moment, we experience nirvana, cutting through samsara, an experience of truth, something real, something that is not an illusion, and something that benefits beings. Similarly, when we experience the reality of chastity, happiness for others, diligence, humility, We experience nirvana. Those are heavenly states, and you can experience them in your physical body or out of your physical body. That's not what matters. What matters is how we're managing our consciousness. This is why the 7th Dalai Lama stated, samsara is one's continuum of rebirth into the contaminated aggregates. This is a beautiful phrase that contains a profound truth about samsara and nirvana and about liberation. And what's particularly interesting about it is it applies to every existing thing. Everything that emerges out of the unmanifested emerges into samsara, into a continuum of rebirth because of karma. Cause and effect. Which is, in its essence, an expression of the contaminated aggregates. So then you might ask, well, what is that? In Buddhism, aggregates is a specific term. Skandhas. We need to think about this not in context of universality or dimensionality, but in context of ourselves. Skandha or aggregate means a collection, a heap. Some things, different things that are put together, that are gathered together. If you think of an aggregate of any other kind, you can understand what this means. If you know anything about construction, you know that concrete is an aggregate. And different types of stones are aggregates. They're different mixes of different materials that are combined together in order to form something new. So when we build buildings or sidewalks or streets, we're working with aggregated materials to produce a hard surface. The ego is exactly like that. It is an aggregate of different dimensionality or different densities of matter and energy. So in Buddhism, the skandhas are seen as having 5 fundamental aspects. These are completely interdependent and interrelated. We've given lectures about this before, and we likely will again. And today I'm just pointing at it to remind you. We won't go deeply into this. The 5 skandhas are rupa, vedana, samnya, samskara, and vijnana. In synthesis, these are form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and discernment. In other words, they are everything that you are. What you are, what you experience, what you think is yourself, is really just aggregates. These 5 collections or heaps give you the sense of being a person, a being, a self, with whatever name you give yourself, or whatever name your parents gave you. What you think you are is really just aggregated experiences, aggregated perceptions. But let me tell you, in synthesis, the ultimate point of Buddhist philosophy and psychology, that perception is an illusion. It is not yourself. It is not real. It is not permanent. It is not independently existing. It is a temporary, transient illusion that seduces you into believing it is real, and it sustains, and it exists, and it can be satisfied. And that's all lies. Observe yourself consistently, deeply, with an inquisitive, cognizant perception, and you will discover that this physical body is not yourself. It is not your perception. It is not your consciousness. It is just physicality. And if you examine deeply sensations, you will find the same thing. Sensations come and go. They're really illusory. And if you observe sensations in terms of perceptions, you'll find the same thing. Your concepts, the sense that you have of perceiving things physically or internally also is illusory. And you go deeper into the mental formations that you have, ideas, concepts, memories, you also find these are illusions. They're like clouds in the sky. They don't last. They come and go. They actually contain nothing. And deeper into the actual process of discernment or perception and consciousness, also, where is the self? In all of that, you find there is no self, no real continuity, no permanence. So this is why the seventh Dalai Lama pointed out, samsara is one's continuum of rebirth into the contaminated aggregates. Samsara is the circling, the repetition of a perception of being that is essentially a lie, an illusion. In Hinduism, they call this Maya. And unfortunately, because yoga and Hinduism and Asian philosophy in general has been taught so badly in the West, that people now think that Maya, which is also a name of the Divine Mother, has come here and put this veil of illusion on us as some kind of game or some kind of punishment. And that we suffer in the veil of existence, the illusion of existence, as some sort of joke. What we don't perceive is that we did it to ourselves, and we are doing it to ourselves every day. We produce Maya. We create Maya. We sustain the illusion because we're constantly engaged in it. Thinking that what we think and believe and perceive is real when it isn't. Let me give you an example. A crude example, but it illustrates the point. When we watch television, or a movie, or we play a video game, or we're really into our story, whatever kind of story we're really hooked on, we get so into it, we're there. We forget our body, we forget ourselves, we forget who we are, and we are in that story. That world that we're perceiving becomes our world. We stop perceiving where our physical body is. We're only seeing that image of the world that's bounced in our imagination, and we're there. We are the actor. We are the character. We sweat. We get tense. We cry. We get angry. We react emotionally, intellectually, even physically to the imaginary perception of that story. In other words, we are deeply asleep, completely hypnotized, deep in samsara, willingly, willfully, craving it. It's an escape for us. We do that because we want to escape suffering. We want to be distracted from our problems, from our life. We want to experience being the hero or the heroine, being in that romance or being in that action, being the one who's accomplishing whatever deeds are being accomplished in the story or the whatever it is we're experiencing in that way. We don't realize that we, our consciousness, our aggregates, are producing the Maya, the illusion, and we are deepening our suffering by doing that. Deepening our identification, our hypnosis. That is a simple example of what we're really doing all day long. But all day long we do it in a more subtle way, in a way that we don't even notice. The example I'm giving you can kind of notice because it's a little bit strong, and we all do it. More profound, more significant is the way we do it all day long. Daydreaming, worrying, imagining this, remembering that, always distracted, always dreaming about a future, or remembering the past, or craving something we don't have, or wishing we didn't have something we do. That is all Maya. It is all samsara. Tsongkhapa, who is a great teacher in Buddhism, maybe one of the greatest, stated that if one does not think hard about the drawbacks of suffering, one has not sufficient yearning for liberation. If one does not consider the source of all suffering, the gateway to samsara, one cannot properly know the eradication, nirvana, of samsara. Be moved to renounce this existence, weary of it, and cherish the knowledge of what binds one to samsara. This is an expression of the introductory levels of every genuine religion. In the Sutrayana level, or the beginning levels of every religion, this is the primary goal of the instructors. To help the student become fully conscious of samsara, of suffering, how it exists, why it exists, and how to stop it. If we don't think about that, if we don't have cognizance of that, we will waste our time in these types of teachings. We will accomplish nothing. In fact, we will just make problems. And we find that in many teachings where the people are just there to have a place to go. People just go to church, or they go to the temple or the school just because they need a place to go. And they find a community there, or they find some comfort of some kind, or some kind of social engagement, or even some kind of power. And that's really all they're there for. So they're not only wasting their time, they're generally making problems. To be a sincere student is to begin with this. To really analyze suffering, our own and others. And to really analyze the drawbacks of it. What it is, where it starts, and ultimately how to stop it. And the only way we can really do that is by being sincere and observing ourselves. So we're going to talk about 6 fundamental aspects of samsara. How they work. And their importance. So we can work on this aspect of our own spiritual development. In recent weeks, all of us have been observing the incredible uncertainty of life. There have been events unfolding that are teaching this in a very dramatic way. And these events will not be the last. Hurricanes, wars, political and economic changes, famines, diseases, many types of problems that are emerging that point out for us the first of the 6 sufferings of samsara, which is continual uncertainty. We all suffer from one aspect of Maya, or an illusion, which is created by our ego and sustained by our ego, and we very much want it to be true, so we believe in it, and that is this, that one day we will get to that place where everything will be just right. We will have the education, the money, the family, everything will be set up, and it will be just perfect. Just the way we imagined it should be. We'll have the right amount of money in the bank, we'll have the house and the kids and the job, and the whole thing, it'll all be just right. But there's just this one problem, and I just can't solve it, and then another problem comes, and I can't solve it. And those who are a little bit older probably realize that this is a complete illusion. And the sooner you realize it, the happier you will become. Nagarjuna stated that fathers, sons, wives, and enemies can change. Friends may become the opposite and change back again. Samsara holds no shred of certainty. Once again, the older you become, the more you experience the truth of this. People you rely on and trust suddenly become your betrayers. People you thought were your enemies suddenly become your friends. Families turn against one another. Everything is constantly changing. We would love to be able to control it so that it would suit ourselves. But the reality is, we can't even control ourselves. Thus, we have no hope of controlling anything in our environment. Not our children, not our spouses, not our parents, our coworkers, our boss, our government. Nothing. The reality is, everything is uncertain. Everything is unreliable. Everything is impermanent, except your being, your innermost. That divinity that resides within you, that is urging you to awaken. So if we develop the cognizance of the uncertainty of all things, we reduce the power of samsara over our consciousness. Right now, we believe very much in the certainty of things. We think, well, in 6 months I'm going to do this, and in a year I'm going to do this, and in 2 years I'll be here, in 3 years I'll be there. We have this whole plan. It's all a big fancy lie that we develop to tell ourselves. If you're really sincere and you really watch the process of your life, you'll recognize that everything you plan is wrong. Nothing ever goes the way you think it's going to go. And you're always surprised and mostly disappointed. So it's smarter, wiser, to not do that. Granted, we need a little bit of planning. When you're young, you need to prepare yourself to live a life. You need an education. You need to be prepared. So you need to figure out school, living situation, job, to cover your basic needs. That requires a little bit of forethought. There's no doubt. Parents need to have some forethought. People who have jobs of responsibility need to make some planning. But never, ever assume that things will go according to your plan, because they never will. So being prepared for uncertainty, comprehending uncertainty, helps to eliminate the power of samsara over the consciousness. The second fundamental aspect of samsara is emphasized in this quote from the Great Play Sutra. If a man were to receive all celestial pleasures, all human pleasures, it would not be enough. He would seek even more. In samsara, you will never ever find satisfaction. No matter how much you gain, you will never be satisfied. That is, your ego will never be satisfied. Even if you were to become the emperor of the world, you would want to conquer the other planets. So we have to really comprehend this in the moment. Every time we feel a craving, every time we feel that we don't have something that we want, which basically, just in case you hadn't realized it, is pretty much 100% of the time. Because we're pretty much 100% of the time identified with one ego or another. I know everyone likes to think that we're serious spiritual people and that we don't have any desires or cravings. You're fooling yourself. Our state as a humanity is characterized 100% by desire. But it isn't always desire for hot dogs and chocolate and hamburgers or money or sex, although those are some big ones. Sometimes our desire is for attention. Sometimes it is for respect. Sometimes for power. Sometimes for comfort or love. Sometimes we just want to be ignored. We want people to leave us alone, and they won't. These are all different types of subtle or gross desires that prevent us from feeling and experiencing the natural state of the consciousness, which is a state of satisfaction and contentment. The consciousness in itself, when it is unbound, is a state of contentment and peace. It is a state of serenity, of lacking nothing, wanting nothing, just being, and being happy. We don't experience that. In fact, many of us have no idea what that means. And our only comprehension of the word satisfaction is related with the fulfillment of a desire and the experience of a sensation. So we think, well, I had that big meal, now I feel satisfied. That is not satisfaction. That is drunkenness. Drunkenness on a sensation. Some of us feel that after the sexual act we feel satisfied. That is not satisfaction. That is expiation. That is to be depleted, drained of vitality. That is to be tired. That is not satisfaction or contentment. The contentment, the serenity of the consciousness does not crave. It simply is. It is a beautiful experience. A beautiful quality that you can experience whether you're in the body or out of the body. But it can only be experienced when you are here and now, awake. And the consciousness is not conditioned by anything, but is bright, perceptive, aware. And in that it experiences true nature. Joy. Happiness. No need to change anything. Not oneself, not others, not one's environment. Able to just accept. Even when one is suffering. How else do we explain the experiences of those great masters who were persecuted, tortured? And even in that process of being abused, looked into the faces of their abusers with gratitude, with love, with compassion, with patience, with acceptance. The black magicians claim that no true initiate will allow that to happen to them. But the black magicians have no comprehension of the consciousness. They only comprehend pride. The consciousness has no pride. It has dignity. That is not pride. Dignity is the natural state of a consciousness that is not above or below anyone. It just is. It loves. It is humble. It is satisfied. The third quality is expressed in this quote from the scripture, engaging in the deeds of bodhisattvas, which states, "You could go again and again to upper realms and enjoy so much bliss. When you die, you fall to the sufferings of the lower realms, where the suffering is unbearable and lasting." This is a law of samsara driven by its very nature, which is cause and effect, which is impermanence, which is a form of suffering that requires, that demands the circling of all things. No matter how beautiful your body is, no matter how much you work out, and how much organic food you eat, it will get sick and die. And you will have to be born again. No matter your station in life, no matter how poor you are or how rich you are, no matter how beautiful you are or ugly, how well loved or how greatly hated, You will lose this body and take another. And you will lose that one too and take another. As long as you are chained to the wheel of samsara. And that chain is your own ego, your karma. No matter how great your station, whether physically or internally, so long as you owe a debt, you will pay it. And you pay it through losing your body, through being recycled. The wealthiest people on this planet, the most powerful, are still killed by microbes, by viruses, by cancers. They have no power over such little things. So why do we want to be like that? Those who are spiritually minded believe that by awakening consciousness, by creating the astral body and the mental body and the causal body, by becoming a Buddha, we can escape all of that. And we can go live in a nirvanic level and be free and live there for a long time. And do what we want and have power and be beautiful. We're fooling ourselves. That's also Maya. Even the gods are subject to this law. Every manifested thing is subject to this law. There is an exception, and we're going to get to that at the end. But every body, whether physical or more subtle, that is created by nature, will be taken back by nature. This is invariance. There are no exceptions. The only way that you can transcend this law is to have a body that does not belong to nature. A body that was created outside of the wheel of samsara, based on other forces and laws, and thus is not subject to these laws. And there's only one way to create such a body, and that is through death and resurrection. And very few accomplish it. It is very difficult. Nonetheless, it can be done. If you really want it, you can do it. Even the gods are subject to this. Even the Buddhas. You see, everything in every level of nature on the entire tree of life is managed by cause and effect. Those who live in the realms of the demigods or the gods were born into those realms because in their previous existences they had produced the causes that gave rise to that birth. They performed good deeds. They sacrificed for others. They gave of themselves. And their just reward is to be born in the higher realms. But unfortunately, things are so beautiful and pleasant in those places that they don't work on themselves anymore. And they're not capable or able to perform more good deeds. So they exhaust the benefit. They use up the capital that gained them that birth and didn't produce any more good actions. So when that time is expired, they fall. Born into lower realms again because they still owe karma. They haven't been able to pay it. So no matter, even if you're born into the body of a god, you will lose it if you have not satisfied 100% of your debts, karmic debts. On that note, let's point out that to leave a body is not pleasant. That's why all of us avoid the subject of death. In this part of the world, no matter how dreadful the news, they never show you the dead bodies. People just can't handle it. We want to avoid it. And this is really a disservice to us. It prevents us from comprehending the reality of death. It emphasizes and encourages this illusion that we won't die, that somehow we will be an exception. Many of us have never seen a dead body. So our illusion is very strong. This illusion of immortality. Very powerful. In other parts of the world, they see the dead. Even on the street. But here, as soon as someone dies, we cover them up. We hide them. No one's allowed to take pictures. No one's allowed to show pictures. It's hidden. Really, it's cruel to do that. We need to see death. We need to comprehend it. It is inevitable. It is unpleasant. It is painful. And because we don't comprehend that, we are deepening our suffering instead of improving on it. By avoiding death, seeing it, understanding it, we are deepening our suffering. The fourth quality of samsara is to be born again and again. And on this, Nagarjuna stated that you are gradually squeezed as hard as someone crushing sesame. Being born is anything else like it. We know that culturally we love to celebrate birth. And we think of birth as something very beautiful. And there's no doubt that birth provides a great opportunity for us to do the work. We need a physical body to succeed in this type of work. But this, again, just like with the process of death, with the process of birth, we've cast a real illusory veil over it. And we don't like to see how gruesome it is. So we hide the blood, the pain, the tearing of flesh, the sickness that the pregnant woman goes through, the incredible pain and suffering. And then, the pain of the child. This photo shows you the screaming, pained face of a newborn. It is a very, very painful process for the mother, yes, but mostly for the baby. We forgot. Maybe willingly. Maybe because it's something we don't want to remember. But it is very painful to be born. Not only just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Because at that age, when the soul is first placed into that small, weak body, your consciousness has some degree of recollection relevant to your own development. And coming back into this world is a horror. It is unthinkably terrifying. It is not something that we welcome. It is not something that we want. It is awful. And then to have the process be what it is. And to come out and see how ugly all the people are, and how terrifying our parents look, and how everything smells terrible. Birth is really a gruesome, gruesome process. And what we forget is that we repeat this process, and repeat this process, and repeat it, and repeat it, and repeat it, because of karma. Because we owe debts here. We have to come here to pay. And we live our lives and we don't pay. We deepen our debts. We come here with this sense of entitlement, like the world owes me, and I want this, and I want that, and I want all these things, and if I don't get them, I'm going to make all of you suffer. I'm going to have a bad attitude. I'm going to steal. I'm going to lie. I'm going to be grumpy because I didn't get what I wanted. And then I'm going to die, and then I'm going to be really upset because I have to be born again, and come back and do it again, and repeat the same mistakes, and make it worse. And we keep doing it. We need to wake up. We need to realize that these processes are very painful. The fifth is to go from high to low and back again. This aspect of samsara points out the impermanence of all things and the cyclic or recurrent nature of all things. No matter how much you may acquire, you will lose it. No matter how high you may reach in society, whether it's a political, spiritual, or educational society, you will fall. It is inevitable. Nothing can be sustained in samsara. Nothing. So the Vinaya, the transmission of the Vinaya says, all collections end up running out. The high end up falling. Meeting ends in separation. Living ends in death. The teacher Milarepa stated that every time he meets someone, he remembers that they will become an enemy. Every time he meets someone with joy and gratitude, he remembers he will suffer the pain of separation. It's a way of training the consciousness to not be identified and not make assumptions. To always remember the cycle of things in samsara. Even though we may be gathered as a group and we may be able to make plans together, the truth is our time together will be short. Months, maybe years. And then we will all be dispersed to different places. Again, cycling, different situations, different people, different circumstances, constantly changing, nothing reliable. We may build up a fortune, we will lose it. We may get promoted and promoted and promoted, but then we'll get fired. The company will sell. It will be closed. We will be out. We may acquire all these different degrees, rise up in the educational system, and then find ourselves without a job. This is the nature of samsara. We have to train the consciousness to comprehend that, not fall victim to the illusion of the ego that thinks, like Icarus, I will take these wings and fly to the sun, forgetting that the sun will melt the wax of our illusions, and we will fall back to the earth. This applies even spiritually. Many enter into different spiritual groups, learn the doctrine, become instructors and leaders of groups, and think they're on their way to heaven before they find themselves in a great conflict. The schools are broken and dissolved. There's great criticism and controversy. And suddenly they find themselves the subject of ridicule. It would have been better to renounce wealth, to renounce fame, to not seek the respect of others, to not seek social elevation, to not seek to be satisfied in samsara, but instead seek to escape it. This also applies to spiritual degrees that are acquired internally. Even if physically we live as a hermit, poor, unknown, anonymous, and we awaken consciousness, we eliminate ego, we develop the soul, but we still retain pride. We still retain atoms of lust. We will fall. Even those who are gods internally fall because of pride, because of envy, because of lust, because of anger. So these laws apply not just to our physical aspect, but internally as well. This is one of the sufferings of samsara. And the final one is, really, no matter what happens, we are always alone. We are born alone. We will die alone. It has never been any other way. It never will be any other way. Many people seek to surround themselves with as many friends, quote, friends, as possible to cultivate a sense of security and importance, to feel wanted, needed, valued. Some of us do that with physical things. We shop a lot, we buy a lot, we fill ourselves, our environment with a lot of things that we purchase, new clothes, new gadgets, all to give us this sense of security that we're not alone, that we have something, that we've accomplished something. It's an illusion. Some of us do that with spiritual teachings too. Pack ourselves with theories and books and classes and communities, all in an effort to avoid that sense of loneliness in our heart. We waste enormous time and energy on frivolous distractions, avoidances of reality. We should instead turn and face it. Look it in the eye. We are born alone, we die alone. Accept it and prepare for it, and don't be bothered by it. When we're sick, we want everyone's sympathy. Oh, I feel so bad. Come and pat me on the head. Give me some soup. Whatever. We want attention. We want others to feel what we feel. We don't want to feel alone. This is pride and fear. We need to realize that that is just the way it is. Not let it disturb our serenity. Not let it disturb our consciousness. We should remember God. When we really remember ourselves, we never feel alone. You feel alone because you forget God. We forget our being. We've lost touch with sensing divinity. That is why we feel alone and why we fill our lives with meaningless distractions. Because we forget how to feel the presence of the divine. When you feel that presence and awaken consciousness to the degree that you never lose sight of that sense, you never feel alone. You never feel afraid. Because that presence vibrates from within your very core, which is the consciousness, not the aggregates. The consciousness itself. It is an extension of God, divinity. So ultimately, all 6 of these qualities affect everyone in every level of existence, and the antidote to them all is the same: to awaken. To synthesize them all, Nagarjuna stated in his letter to a friend that many things can damage your life. It's more impermanent than a bubble on a river tossed by the wind. Cognizance of this statement leads one to become very sensitive to the present. And this is precisely what we need. The ego is not sensitive to the present moment. It is always comparing with its illusions. It glances briefly at the present only so that it feels dissatisfied. And in that dissatisfaction, hypnotizes us and says, we could have much more. So it sees that commercial with all those beautiful people smiling and happy because they bought that new vacuum cleaner. And we feel, I need that too. If I don't have that vacuum cleaner, I'm not going to be happy. And so then we start planning, how am I going to get the money to buy that vacuum cleaner? Because it's really expensive. Maybe I'll get another job. Maybe I'll borrow some money from somebody and get in debt or get a credit card. And this is how we march on this path from these subtle wrong transformations of impressions. Being seduced by the illusions that our own mind is creating. If instead we view all appearances for what they are, mere appearances, we remember ourselves, here and now, present, remembering divinity, then you will clearly see everything in life is impermanent. All of the aggregates that we experience here and now are impermanent. Our form, the sensations, the perception, the mental formations, and the discernment of them, all impermanent. But there is something in the midst of that that doesn't go away. Pure awareness. The consciousness itself. If you can learn that taste and learn to sustain its presence, you can change everything. So let's go a little deeper into analyzing these forms of suffering. I know it's not pleasant to talk about suffering, but we need to. We all like to avoid the subject. We think it's suffering to talk about suffering. But let me tell you something. If you really want to go into the higher aspects of spirituality, if you really want to talk face to face with divinity, this is how you will do it. You can't leap ahead in the spiritual process. You have to start here and now and change what is preventing you from that experience. And what is preventing you from it is yourself, your own mind. The way you perceive is flawed. We all need to change that about ourselves. So this theoretical presentation leads us to a practical experience that opens the doors to genuine truth, not theory. So those 6 aspects of suffering that we just went through are related to the 6 realms. It does not mean that the first aspect is only related to the first realm. All 6 realms have all 6 forms of suffering. So we'll start with the animals. We'll start there because we like animals. Right? Some of us more than others. The animals, when we talk about this, generally, most people assume we're only talking about physical animals. And we pointed out in a previous lecture that that's not what we're emphasizing. We use the example of physical animals in order to understand ourselves psychologically, because psychologically speaking, we are animals. No one anywhere can prove that the so-called human beings have transcended the animal state. Cannot prove it. There's too much evidence that proves that we so-called human beings are just animals with different shaped bodies. We just have reasoning. It's the only difference. We are very instinctive. We are violent, destructive, driven by cravings and impulses that we cannot control. So in many ways, we are worse than the animals. Most animals do not destroy their own habitat. We do. Most animals do not destroy their own food and water supply. We do. Really, we're worse than animals. So when we analyze, that was funny. When we analyze the existence of animals physically, we can find characteristics of how karma processes in our own lives and see how we are subject to those laws at that level of existence. The most simple example is to look at how animals suffer in our world under us. What we do to them. What is the experience of an animal in this world? I'm not talking about your cat or your dog that you pamper, that you think is your servant, but it's really the other way around. Because the animal does not pick up your poop. You pick up the animal's poop. You are the servant. The animal does not serve you food. You serve food to the animal. You are serving the animal. I'm not talking about those animals. They're spoiled. I'm talking about the other animals in the world that we don't treat that well and that we never have. We treat animals as servants and slaves without any real regard for their well-being. Traditionally and historically, they have carried huge burdens for long periods of time with no relief. They are fed the poorest quality food. They have access to the poorest quality water and material for their existence, such as places to live. At any given moment, they can be killed or eaten without any hesitation and without any concern for their feelings or their well-being. They are killed cruelly. Nowadays, it's worse. Nowadays, we push all the animals into cages. We give them chemicals, and we slaughter them by the millions to feed the whims of people that go to fast food places and restaurants and grocery stores all over the world without any concern for the well-being of those creatures. Those creatures living in those bodies suffer unimaginable suffering from birth to death. Not an instant of contentment. Not a moment of peace. It is a life of continual abuse and suffering without respite. Truly, it is a level of hell. And this is not just amongst cows, but amongst pigs and chickens and ducks and many types of animals. This is all over the world, but especially in the West. That state that is happening physically reflects a psychological level of existence that many so-called human beings live within now. We talked about this in the first lecture. Many of our so-called human being neighbors really are living at an animal level. They are driven solely by instinct. They do not have access to clean food and water. They live at the whim of those who have power. And they are killed just to serve the selfish interests of those in power. They are sent off to war. They are subjected to all kinds of chemicals that they don't even know about. And they die. Many so-called humans on this planet are living at this level. Impoverished, without access to a moment of peace. By percentage, we could say the majority of the humanoid creatures on this planet live at this level now. Really at an animal level. It's very sad, but it's true. We, of course, who don't have that situation, have no cognizance of it at all. Worse, we don't realize that tomorrow we could be living there. Because at any moment we could die. And in that moment we could be reborn into a body at the animal level, living in one of those places, suffering intensely. And boy, will we regret the leisure that we just lost and the opportunity that we had to practice. Because when you're at the animal level living that life, you cannot practice gnosis. You cannot. Constant pain and suffering, not possible. Your consciousness would have to be very powerful to overcome that and transform it and awaken. None of us have that. Look how weak we are now, and we're so pampered. Even in the state we have now with so much luxury, we are very weak. We get a little stomach ache and we moan and cry and complain and go around complaining to everybody about, oh, our stomach hurts. We don't know anything about suffering. Not the first thing. Now in the eastern United States, there's been a big hurricane and a lot of people are suffering. It's sad. The suffering is sad. It's strong here. But in comparison with what the rest of the world has faced, it is a fraction. People that suffered in Indonesia, in India, Bangladesh, Burma, other countries like China, for example, when they get it, It's already been after years and years of worse suffering. No clean food, no clean water, persecution from their government, local wars, threat of being killed every day. Hurricane comes? Okay, big deal. Some wind and water. Yeah, my house got knocked down, but at least I'm alive. Hurricane's like nothing, or an earthquake is like nothing when you live in that type of environment every day. So we have compassion for everyone, but really we have to put it in perspective. The next level is the level of the hungry ghosts. In Buddhism, this is characterized as a type of creature who suffers intense, constant craving, but can never be satisfied. So most people naturally study this type of teaching and think that it literally means these hungry ghosts in some other dimension. And there is that level of truth. That does exist. But the reason this teaching is given is to point out to us the psychological characteristics and that level of suffering. Hungry ghosts are considered a step below the animals. So if you can imagine the animal state getting even worse, that is the level of the hungry spirit or hungry ghost. This type of creature not only has no peace, no respite, is constantly under threat, but is consumed by such an overpowering thirst or hunger that they can't think of anything else. Not even for an instant can they think of Buddha or Dharma or Gnosis. Not even an instant, because the craving, the physical need that they have is so overpowering. And worse, when they finally find some liquid or some food to consume to try to deal with that, it hurts them. So they find water, they're so thirsty, they find water, they try to drink it, but it burns like fire. So not only are they not satisfied, they're pained. It's a constant process of suffering. This exists in hell, but it also exists physically. Amongst our addicts. And the vast majority of our population is addicted to something. When we think of addiction, we always think of alcohol or drugs. These are powerful addictions and deadly. And these are hungry ghosts. These are people who suffer very powerful addiction and can think of nothing else. Their life is ruled by their craving for an element that causes them pain. It gives them the illusion of satisfaction. That illusion sustains briefly, but when it goes away, their suffering is even more intense than before they took the substance. Their pain is worse. So they need more and more. But this type of addiction does not exist only in relation with physical substances, because its root is psychological. They are addicted because of their psychology, not their physicality. The physicality becomes altered with the need for the physical substance because the psychology has created it. Scientists think it's the other way around. They've got it backwards. Children are born addicted because their mind is addicted from their previous life. And that addiction is not just to physical substances. The most powerful addiction in the world today is lust. Without any comparison. It is the single most potent and destructive addiction on the planet. It is the central reason why this planet is sinking into the abyss very rapidly. All of the other addictions are clustered around it. They are offshoots of it. But lust is the core. Pornography, sexual abuse of all forms are in their heart an addiction that is rooted in the psyche. It is a psychological addiction, not physical. Proof of this is that even if your physical capacity to have sex is cut, the psychological addiction remains. It's still there. Those addictions or the level of hungry ghosts. Unless that addiction is transformed, that person will only sink deeper into hell. In the hell realms is where we find all those beings who have processed through these other regions, the animals, the hungry ghosts, and into hell. That process is a process of simply not changing, of simply being a victim of the ego, of continually believing in the illusions of the ego, of continually trying to find satisfaction in egotistical ways through sensations, physical and psychological, and building up such a huge mass of cause and effect in oneself that nature has no other choice but to follow its own law, which is to process you through hell. Hell is simply that, cause and effect. What one suffers in hell is simply the effects of all one's previous actions. All of our anger, our lust, our envy, our pride manifests itself back to us like a mirror. This is the law of invariance. When we throw a stone into a pond, we see the stone hits the water and the water goes down, the stone descends, but then the water pops back up and goes up high. So if we look and compare these 2 points, there's an equal flow. The water that goes down, the water that goes up. That's invariance. Same thing happens when we engage in pride and lust and envy. When we propel that energy out, it propels back to us. But it is not equal. It is magnified. This is the basic law of karma. We've talked about it many times. That is what hell is. It is the condensation of all those forces upon our consciousness. I know that for most people, when they study religion, we all get really impatient with those fiery preachers who get up and yell, "You're all going to hell, and you better repent and say that you believe." And they go on and on about all these different types of suffering in hell. We get really impatient with that. We don't like to hear it. So we turn the channel and we go to some other church where they don't talk that way and they talk really nice and sweet, and we like to hear that. But really, we need to hear it. We need to comprehend and understand that hell is real. We're already experiencing it now, physically, because of the cause and effect that we've already put in motion. If we don't change that cycling, that circling, that samsara, we will deepen. Our experience of that suffering will deepen. That's just how nature works. So we need to study hell. We need to study the sufferings that come from wrong action. We need to understand what those beings experience, and we need to be scared. We need to be afraid of that. If we're not, we are immense fools. Likewise, we need to understand the sufferings of the higher realms. This is another great illusion that we have, which is propagated by many different types of religions and traditions, especially nowadays with New Age theories. We all believe that if we somehow gain access to heaven, that there will be no suffering and everything will be just perfect. And we'll be up there with our white robe, with all our friends and family members, eating ice cream and singing praises to God. And this is a lovely dream, but it's only a dream. That place does not exist. There are heavens, but they are not what we think they are. Not by any stretch. Suffering exists amongst the gods. Strange as it may sound to those who've been indoctrinated by Judeo-Christian theories for the last 2,000 years, there are gods. The Jews and Christians call them angels. The Greeks call them titans and gods. In Asia they call them devas, bodhisattvas, and buddhas, different types of names. Jinns, maruts. Many types of beings that are awakened in the superior levels of life. But these are not perfect beings. They are better than us. But they are not resurrected masters. They are not free of the wheel of samsara, the wheel of suffering, the cycling of samsara. These gods are not immortal. They are not omniscient, all-powerful. They are not all-knowing. They're more powerful than us. They know more than us. They live a lot longer than we do. But not even those levels are permanent. They are impermanent and subject to cause and effect. So the gods suffer. They suffer in ways that are a little bit hard for us to understand. And we all think, if we pursue spirituality, we will become a god and we'll escape all this suffering down here. And that could be true in a relative sense. But actually, if you become one of these types of gods, in a sense, your situation would become worse. What would happen to you if right now, all of a sudden, you won the sweepstakes or the lottery and won millions of dollars, didn't have to work, and had everything you could ever desire? What would you do? Do you really think that you would keep pursuing gnosis? That you would really awaken consciousness? Do you really think that your ego would renounce all that and go meditate and work on your ego? I don't think so. I think every one of us would buy the most expensive car, a big fancy house, and give money to all the people we like and laugh at the ones we don't. And we'd fill up our fat ego with all of its desires. It's exactly what we would do. We might think that we're stronger than that, but we aren't. And that's why we don't have it. So if we were to become a god all of a sudden, that's exactly what happens. We become fat on the satisfaction of pleasurable things. We would not spend an atom of energy trying to liberate ourselves from samsara. Not an atom. That's what happens to the gods. They love to live in that level, and they live in that level as long as their karma allows it. But then the karma is exhausted. That energy that sustained them in that level, and suddenly they're facing the proposition of having to descend. It's very unpleasant. They fall. They have to go back down. They suffer. They lose all of that pleasure. They lose all of that power. They come back down here and have so much discouragement and pain and resentment that generally speaking, they become devils. Because they also don't comprehend karma. They feel entitled. They feel better than everyone else. And so they go around with a lot of arrogance. Sometimes they enter spiritual groups and they recover some of their powers, but they retain this sort of arrogance and sense of entitlement that they should be worshipped and others should follow them. And you should understand that I'm a deity and I'm the master of such and such and blah, blah, blah. They suffer a deeper sense of illusion because of all that. So yes, the gods have a level of suffering that's more subtle and more dangerous. Amongst the demigods, it's similar, but because they're less powerful, they envy the higher gods. Demigods are those who have acquired some degree of spiritual development, and they may live in another realm or even physically. And they envy the higher gods and want to be at those levels, so they're always competing. Now, I pointed out earlier in this lecture that these regions or realms do not apply simply to other worlds. They also apply here. They apply to our state of being, to our level of consciousness. Let me explain that in this simple sense. There are those who are gods, spiritually, who have physical bodies, who walk the planet. We're not talking about gods who are incorporeal. Some of them are, but some of them are here with physical bodies. The physical aspect really doesn't matter. What we're talking about is the level of being, the level of consciousness. Likewise with the demigods. We call them hasnamusan. Those who are split between the lower and upper. They have some awakening, but they have a lot of ego. Some of them have physical bodies, some don't. Really, from where our perspective is, we need to know about the ones who have physical bodies, because we could be one of them. We might be one of those who has some degree of development from past lives or this life. And we envy those with more and try to compete with them. We want to have a bigger group, a bigger school, more fame, more recognition, more titles. So we're always talking bad about the other guy. Do you know he did this? I heard this rumor. That other teacher, he's really bad. He did this and this and this. He's a homosexual. He's an adulterer. He's a fornicator. He's stealing money from the congregation, etc., etc. All these types of rumors. These are activities of demigods. Gossip, competition, envy, arrogance, jealousy. When we say that demigods, we're talking about the level of being. And in that sense, that level is worse than we are now. It's more dangerous. It's more dangerous in this sense. If you have no power, then your actions will have no impact. Right? It's logical. If you have more power, your actions have more impact. So if you use that in power wrongly, the impact you create is far worse. The gods and demigods have a lot of power. Maybe not physically, but spiritually, consciously. When they misuse it, huge consequences. So their situation is not better than ours. So it's absurd for us to envy them or to want to be a god in that sense. We need to be aware of that. And then the third, sixth actually, and final kingdom we're going to look at is the humanoid kingdom. Again, physically, we often think that the humans are you and me. And we say that only out of politeness, because we are not humans yet. Strictly speaking, spiritually speaking, a human being is someone who has already created the soul. Someone who has some awakened consciousness. Someone who has an astral body, a mental body, and a causal body. Someone who knows what Eden is and experiences that. Not all the time, but they know how to experience it. So we're not human beings yet. But those who are humans also have their types of suffering. One is they suffer in the middle. They are in the middle of the hells and heavens. They are pulled by both. We all suffer that to some degree. We've got all of our desires pulling us, and we've got the longing of God pulling us. So we're pulled in the middle. The more you awaken, the stronger those two forces become in you. The more you respond to the call of divinity pulling you towards heaven, the more your ego fights against it. Don't think it will get easier. What gets easier is to understand. The fight does not get easier. Comprehension starts to come, and you need that. But the fight does not lessen. It gets stronger. The humans also suffer from the flux of samsara, from all those uncertainties, from impermanence, from aging, from illness, from weakness, from having to eat and drink and work and deal with a family and deal with all of the difficulties of being in life. We have no power. No power. These are powerful, difficult forces. But the difference is, amongst all these 6 kingdoms, 6 realms in samsara, there is a big advantage to the kingdom that we're in now, to the level that we're all in right now. And the advantage is exactly what you're doing right now. You can learn. You can study the doctrine. You can change. Beings in hell, nearly impossible to change. Hungry ghosts, nearly impossible. Animals, impossible. Gods and demigods, very difficult. Because the illusion of power is so strong. The humans, being in the middle, see both sides. And although we suffer, we at least have that brief opportunity. Don't waste it. That is why we need to study suffering. We need to study heaven. We need to study hell. We need to study the doctrine. We need to understand that all things are impermanent and that at any instant we can lose this. Everyone on the East Coast of the United States just passed through a powerful experience. A handful learned a powerful lesson that nothing can be relied on except constant change. You can rely on the fact that things will always change. That is true. You cannot rely on anything else except God. So we need to understand what Aryadeva said. How could you not be afraid that you will be bound here, that there may be no end at all to the ocean of suffering in which you drown? For me, this is an extraordinarily painful but insightful statement. And for myself, I feel incredible gratitude toward Aryadeva for saying it. Because it points out an essential truth about the illusion that the ego propagates. That somehow, some way, if we listen to the ego, we will escape suffering. And it's a lie. And it's so easy to see that it's a lie. And the reason we don't see it's a lie is because we don't want to see it. But we must. If we don't look directly square in the face of the lies the ego is propagating in ourselves, we will continue to drown in samsara. In this life and the next and the next and the next. Don't expect that you will change in the future because you may not have one. We don't know when we will die, where we will be born. This might be it. So we need to understand there are 4 paths. All of these paths can be seen in life if we know how to look. Samael Envior stated in his book, The Pistis Sophia Unveiled, that there are 4 paths. The first is the direct path. The second is the nirvanic spiral path. The third is the path of those who separate themselves from the cosmic scenario without having reached the level of adept. And the fourth is the path of those who fail. One of the other misconceptions that people have nowadays about spirituality is that all spirituality is essentially the same and leads to the same place. This is another illusion propagated by the ego. It is a bold lie. It is the same thing as saying all maps lead to the same place, when clearly they do not. A map is specific and can only lead in the place it illustrates. Religions are exactly the same. If a religion is incomplete or flawed, it will lead you nowhere. But if you've never been to that place, you will have no idea that the map is wrong. And religions are like that. Humanity is studying religions, analyzing religions, practicing religions, not having any idea of where they are going. Only believing. If you want to know where you are going, you have to awaken. Then you will know. These 4 paths encompass all spiritual paths. Not only on this planet, but all planets. Every religion and spiritual tradition in existence corresponds to one of these paths. The fourth is the path of those who fail. The vast majority of all beings are walking that path. They believe they are going somewhere. They might respect the gods. They might even follow a demon. They might be very well intentioned. It doesn't matter what the intentions are, what the beliefs are, what the theories are. One is characterized as a failure as long as one remains bound to samsara. So that includes all of us. Sounds harsh, but it's a fact. We don't even know if God exists, and thus we have no spiritual attainment. To be successful spiritually, to be walking an actual path, means to be awakening, to be experiencing reality. That is to be successful. It is not to have memorized a doctrine or a book, or to be able to teach it well, or to have a lot of followers. None of that means anything, because in samsara, everything's impermanent. As much as you memorize or gain, you will lose it. Most beings are on the path of those who fail. And that includes all of those kingdoms. Amongst all those kingdoms are those who fail. The third path is those we see who separate themselves from the cosmic scenario without having reached the level of adept. This is fairly rare. This is a type of being who learns just enough of a spiritual practice to cleanse just enough of the ego that they can get a vacation off the wheel of samsara. That their consciousness reaches a relative degree of liberation. And so they get a moment of respite, a vacation, you could say. Not permanent. They come back. They separate themselves briefly, but they come back. They did not reach the level of adept, meaning they did not create the soul. They are what we can call an elemental Buddha. Some people call them saints. Pure souls. But really just animal souls who've reduced their animality and who've cleansed their consciousness of some of the negativity. But they are not gods. They are not masters. They are just clean animals, spiritually speaking. Beautiful souls. Really, they are beautiful. But their level of attainment and wisdom is very small. Many of them are those most respected saints and spiritual teachers on the planet today. We think they are great beings when really they're not. They're just a little cleaner than us, spiritually, psychologically speaking. The second path listed here is the nirvanic spiral path. This is even more rare. Someone who is walking that path has created the soul. They have created the solar astral body, the solar mental body, the solar causal body. This means that they have created superior types of vehicles. They are bodies like the physical body, but they are not in the physical world. They are in the fifth dimension and sixth. And they are able to access and utilize those bodies the same way we use our physical body. So they can go into the astral plane, awake, and do like we do here, but in the astral world. So they are Buddhas, angels, masters, but beginners in those levels. They are called nirvanic because they have started and attained some degree of cessation of samsara in themselves psychologically. They have carved out a space in themselves of freedom, of liberation from suffering. They have achieved some degree of nirvana, cessation of the cycling of samsara. They are demigods. Sometimes they have physical bodies, sometimes they don't. Some of them are anonymous in the world. Some of them run spiritual groups. Some are teachers. Some are not. But they are, in quotes, big strong quotes, angels. In the context of their level of spiritual development. They are starting. But listen very clearly to this. They have just as much ego as us. Just because someone has created the soul does not mean they've eliminated their ego. Not at all. To create the soul only requires the elimination of a fraction of ego. Just enough that enough energy can be harnessed and enough consciousness can be liberated in order to allow those bodies to be formed. But you do not have to eliminate your ego to create the solar bodies. That's not the requirement. The work to eliminate the ego is separate. So these nirvanic Buddhas can also be called pratyeka Buddhas. Really don't have to eliminate their ego, and often don't. It's a difficult work. That's why you can understand that the demigods are always fighting with each other, because they still have their ego. Especially pride, jealousy, envy, even lust. These demigods form religions and spiritual groups. They attract followers. They have powers. They display their powers in order to impress others, to so-called inspire them. So here physically, we who are just animals see these other humanoid creatures who have powers, like they can manifest things from the other worlds, they can go out of their body, they can levitate, they can float, they can read your mind, etc., etc., etc. And we think they are a fully developed master. They're not. Complicating that further, many of those amongst the path of those who fail walk that path and awaken their consciousness. They don't develop the soul, but they develop powers. They also awaken consciousness, but trapped in the ego. They also form spiritual groups. They also go around and show their powers off. They read people's minds. They give predictions that come true. They give prophecies. They show all kinds of tricks, levitation, showing up in people's dreams or in their houses, telling people things that were supposedly secret to convince others that they are a great master and a great soul, when in fact they are a demon, a black magician, sorcerers and witches, people who are on the path of failure, the path of hell. Now, complicating this further, all of us who are at the animal level, who are suffering in the midst of samsara with our consciousness asleep, bewildered by all the forces that are in action around us, and confused and trying to find respite from our pain, seeking divinity, see these beings that display powers and think they are genuine and real, and we start to follow them and do what they say, not realizing that what they say is leading us into the path of demonhood, or into the path of being a mere Shravaka, a listener, a follower, someone who just worships someone else but does nothing to awaken. 99-something% of all human beings who call themselves spiritual are on one of those two paths. They're either following a demon or they're following a nirvanic Buddha, and they're gaining nothing. The only way you can be liberated from samsara is to awaken your own consciousness. You don't have to follow anyone but your inner divinity. Don't be confused by anyone. Don't follow anyone. Follow your innermost. Everyone's seeking a master, not realizing that the master they need is inside of their own heart. Humanity, or any of us, are free to choose whatever path we want. God respects our will. Your innermost wants its human soul to be reliant on itself, on divinity, and to be strong, to be a warrior, to not be weak, but to be capable of acting and doing what is right. And that is why God, our innermost, gives us the ability to choose for ourselves and to define ourselves in the world. If we choose the path of being a demon, our innermost says, okay, go ahead, suffer the consequences, and you will learn. It might take you thousands of years to pay your debts from walking on that foolish path, but go ahead. God is not a tyrannical dictator. God is love. Our innermost, our inner Buddha, wants us to become completely. To become. Not to imitate. Not to be a slave. But to be as he is. To become that requires that we comprehend the nature of suffering and know how to transform it. In order to do that, you need incredible insight, self-reliance, powerful willpower. But the main characteristic that you need is compassion. The most important characteristic is compassion. Without exception. These paths, those who fail, those who separate themselves, and nirvanic Buddhas, lack compassion. All of them are concerned with themselves. That's why they are all still in the Wheel of Samsara. Circling, repeating, rising and falling, gaining and losing, being born and dying, going up, going down, again and again and again, from body to body, from kingdom to kingdom, from level to level, again and again and again and again and again. There is only one way out, and that is through compassion. Compassion developed to its fullest degree. A few beings showed us how to do it. The most important one of this era is called Abaramento. This humanity knows him as Yeshua Christos, Jesus Christ. But he's not the only one. Padma Sambhava, Milarepa, Buddha Shakyamuni, Samael Aun Weor, Quetzalcoatl, Moshe, Shlomo, many masters have done this work. Joan of Arc accomplished it. It is a path of fully developing compassion. Real compassion has no self-interest. These three paths, nirvanic path, the separated path, and the path of the failures, are full of self. The illusion of me, the aggregates conditioned by karma, that is the nature of samsara, is to be reborn again and again into the conditioned aggregates, the illusion of self. Whether you are a demon or a god, you are subject to karma and samsara, repeating. The only way out is through the direct path. The direct path renounces self-identification, renounces the ego in all of its aspects, renounces comfort, renounces satisfaction, renounces pride, resentment, jealousy, envy, laziness. It perfects compassion, which recognizes the suffering of all of these beings in samsara, and recognizes that those beings suffer there because they are suffering an illusion of perception. They don't see. The demons don't see the truth. The animals, the hungry ghosts, the demigods and the gods and the human beings don't see reality. They only see through the filter of craving. Craving this, craving that. Never satisfied. Being born again and again. To enter the direct path, you have to first walk the spiral or the nirvanic path, in the sense that you have to create the soul. You have to awaken consciousness. You have to create the astral body. You have to create the mental body. You have to create the causal body. And having reached that level, you are given a choice by a cosmic guardian who shows you these two paths. Do you want to take the easy way for millennia, for thousands of years, to take a spiral route through the cosmos, a gradual process? Or do you want to go directly now, no holding back, straight there, but very painful? Because you have to pay all of the karma from all of your lives now. You have to rectify, you have to face retribution for every harmful action that you ever performed. You have to answer for the illusion of your self-identification that you propagated for lifetimes now. You have to pay your debts to every being that you ever harmed, that you ever lied to, stole from, hurt, to pay it now. Very few make that choice to take that path. That is the direct path. That is the only way off the wheel of samsara. There is no other way. All the other paths and teachings that exist help you migrate from one level to another in the wheel of samsara, but they do not take you out. Thus, they are all more or less useless. You can become a great adherent of different religions, perfect all their teachings, become a god, sustain that level for a little while, but once your karma is exhausted, you will fall again back into the lower worlds. You can become a very powerful demon, awaken a lot of powers, grow your tail very long, and have many medals on your chest for all the harms that you've committed and all of the actions you've done in order to enforce desire and encourage lust and anger and pride in people. But in the end, it will all be stripped from you, and you will suffer eons of pain for those actions. It will all be taken from you, and you will start again from zero. Or you can try to avoid them both and stay in the humanoid level, but little by little, your selfishness, your laziness, your arrogance will catch up with you, and you will sink. It's inevitable. So people don't like to hear all this because it sounds pretty discouraging. We need to hear it. We need to understand that there is a way out. But to get out, you cannot waste an instant, not one moment. And Milarepa said about that, the keystone of the principle I practice is self-liberation from samsara. With this quintessence of all teachings, I clearly see awareness, naked and unsubstantial. My confidence in the view is the transparency of flux. Since I know the illuminating void, I fear not life or death. Very few people understand the teachings of Milarepa. Milarepa is a great master of the Tibetan tradition, and he's widely respected by the Tibetans because he was the first Tibetan to become publicly known as an awakened Buddha. And even better than that, he started out as a black magician. He started out killing people for revenge. So he started out like us. A common person who suffered misfortunes, who learned some spiritual practices in order to get revenge. He killed a bunch of people and then realized, what am I doing? And then he sought to change, and he did. And he became a very highly awakened being, a great bodhisattva. The term bodhisattva refers to someone who's walking the straight path, the direct path. Someone who's going beyond the wheel of becoming. Milarepa achieved that. The very high master. And because of that, his teachings are very hard to understand. All of the bodhisattvas give teachings that are very hard to understand. And so when we hear them, we dumb them down to our level, and thus we corrupt them. This is what happened with the teachings of Jesus. Jesus gave beautiful, profound teachings to humanity, and we destroyed them. We castrated them. We did it. And we did it to the teachings of Krishna and the teachings of Muhammad and the teachings of Moshe and all the Buddhists, because we didn't understand. And now it's happening to the teachings of Samael and Bior. People don't understand them, so they cut out all the stuff they don't understand and just keep the little bit they do. And because of that, they adulterate the teaching. They corrupt it. Not only they divert themselves off the path, but they divert everyone that they spread with that infectious lie. It's a crime. This passage states, the keystone of the principle I practice is self-liberation from samsara. With this quintessence of all teachings, I clearly see awareness, naked and unsubstantial. Hard to understand that. Seems easy, but on the other hand, it seems incomprehensible. And that's because it is. It's something that has to be experienced. Self-liberation. This implies that no one can liberate us but ourselves. In fact, it's stated quite clearly in all the great religions. We have to liberate ourselves through our own actions, cause and effect. We get help from divinity. We get help from spiritual friends. We get help from the doctrine and the teachings. We get help from our community. But without us doing the work ourselves, nothing will happen. Keystone. The keystone of the principle I practice is self-liberation. Keystone is a really important passage that's going to come up for you in the next lecture. Not mine, the other instructor. So pay attention. We just found this connection after these two lectures were already made. So it's pretty surprising to us. We were both shocked. You'll hear it in the next lecture. So remember that term, keystone. With this quintessence of all teachings, I clearly see awareness. Now, in previous lectures, I told you about quintessence. It means the fifth essence, or the fifth element. And that's a statement about Kundalini, about prana. Awareness, of course, is the purity of consciousness that is unfiltered, unconditioned. And it is that aspect that we use that helps us perceive reality. We have to learn about that. No one can teach that. You have to teach yourself how to perceive without filters, how to see, to be here and now, awake. We teach many techniques to fuel that experience, to guide you towards it, to help you comprehend it. But unless you're making the effort, you will never comprehend it. It's something that has to be felt, seen, tasted, touched through your perception. Naked and unsubstantial. is the nature of your innermost consciousness. It is uncontrived, unconditioned, but all-pervasive. It is perception in its purest form, consciousness in its purest form. My confidence in the view is the first step of the Eightfold Path. Some people think view is sort of like, well, it's our theory. We see it like this and like that, and that's our view. That's wrong. That is not view. That's theory. Upright view, or right view as it's sometimes called, is not a theory. It isn't a way of positioning your mind. It is not a belief. It is not something that can be written down or exposed in a teaching. It is a way of seeing. It is a way of experiencing. Not seeing physically, but seeing with the consciousness. Right view, in its developed form, in the presence or in the perspective of a bodhisattva like Milarepa, is to see the insubstantial nature of all things. That's why he's talking about in the transparency of flux. Flux means change. Flux is the coming and going of everything. Flux is samsara. Right view is to see the transparency, the illusion of all manifested activity. Right view is to see that everything that you see is an illusion, is impermanent, is unreliable. And inside of all of that, sustaining all of that, is the absolute, the void. And in that perception is great compassion for all those beings who don't see it, like us. We see and think what we see is real, and think what we see will last, and think what we see can be relied upon, and think we can gain satisfaction from it, and we are wrong on all counts. An awakened bodhisattva sees that is a lie and has confidence in that perception and wants to help us acquire it. And so he says, since I know the illuminating void, I fear not life or death. The illuminating void is the absolute. It is the Ein Sof, Shunyata, the emptiness, the space within which everything exists. In that space, there is no self, there is no I, but there is great love, great compassion, great intelligence, great wisdom, great knowledge. The bodhisattva, who fully develops, becomes an expression of that. Knows the emptiness, perceives the emptiness, and in that perception has great compassion for all beings and wants to show them that experience so that they can liberate themselves from the illusion that causes suffering. That's what this passage is explaining. In that knowledge, which is a form of perception, not intellectualism, is confidence. No fear. No fear of life, no fear of death. No fear of rebirth. No fear of dissatisfaction. No fear of cycling in samsara, because one has escaped it. Whether one is born or one dies, there is no fear. So this statement represents the point of view of a being who escaped samsara. Hard for us to grasp because it's quite far away from where we are now. But it's what we need to understand. And that's why we teach the way we teach. We teach you about the absolute. We teach you about awakening. And we teach you about the tools that facilitate and empower that awakening so that we can cut through the appearances and see reality. Do you have any questions? Everybody was falling asleep in here, so I have to stop now. Sorry it's so boring, but this is the way the teaching works. Okay.
I guess some of our karma is so heavy, ego lower realms of hell.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you get back? It's part of your consciousness. So how do you get that back in terms of working on it again sometimes during your path?
Okay. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. That brings up something really illuminating about something that I was trying to explain earlier and that I probably did a poor job of. So let me see if I can get that page to open. It won't open. Well, when we study the tree of life, I'll just put this one, it more or less says the same thing. When we study the tree of life, we see many dimensions, levels of nature, matter and energy and consciousness, right? Very low levels, very high levels. And right in the middle of that, we see Malkut, which is the Sephiroth that represents our physical presence. Our psychology is dispersed amongst many Sephiroth. It is not integrated. We have the illusion of being integrated. Here in our physical bodies, because of how the brain functions and how the matter and energy is coalesced into this type of body, and the consciousness being inside of it, it gives us this illusion that we are this body, and we are this person, such and such, and we are, what we see. But that's not true. That's an illusion. The reality is that our psyche, although we see reflections of it here physically, actually exist in these other levels of nature. And if we gain the capacity to awaken consciousness in those levels of nature, we can perceive those aspects of our psyche directly. A very scary example of this, when you fall asleep, have you ever noticed the voices that you hear? Anyone notice that? You'd be falling asleep, and all of a sudden you start hearing different voices, and they don't sound like you. It sounds like a lady from another part of the world. Sometimes they have accents, or it's a man, or it's a woman, and it's weird. Those voices aren't anywhere else. They're not coming from the next room or from the TV or anyplace else. They're coming from inside of you. Those are your own egos. Those are psychological elements that you made at some point in your experience. What you're experiencing when you fall asleep is the reflection of the psychological content of those entities, but those entities exist in the fifth dimension. And so when you dream, usually your dreams are your consciousness involved with those entities. So you're dreaming that you're on a bus and you're with these different people and there's a fight and whatever. All those entities that are there are your own egos. So that's how you first can gain perception of them in these ways. And to change them, you have to analyze not only what you experience physically, but in dreams and in meditation, to start understanding the psychological content and how it relates to what you're doing and have done. Now, what's important about that is that the same is true for all the different aspects of our psychology. Spiritually, we have aspects that are not egotistical. We all have virtues. Maybe not a lot, but we do have some virtues. And we can experience those also. And sometimes we experience them as though they are another person. And they are also in the internal worlds with matter and energy. So the important point I'm trying to draw out is pay attention. Not only physically, but in dreams and in meditation and in visions. All of what you perceive is an illusion, but it's an illusion that reflects something psychological that you need to understand. That begins physically. Everything in your life now, without any exception, is a reflection of what you are psychologically. Everything. The way you dress, the way you talk, your interests, where you work, your family, your friends, your spouse, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, your children, all are reflective of your level of being, of your karma, of your psyche. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is coincidental. Everything has a correspondence to who you are and what you have done, without exception. So staring you in the face is the very map of your psyche. Every day. Everything that you see, that you experience, is a reflection of who you are. If you want to change and escape your suffering, comprehend that reflection. When something bothers you, it's because an element in you is impure. When something causes you to be craving or longing for something, it's because something in you is impure. And you need to analyze it. When you have dissatisfaction or satisfaction, you need to analyze it. All of your experience, because it's all reflective of who you are. Now, the question specifically was about how do we work on those submerged elements that we may not be able to perceive. I think from the example I just gave you, you can see that there's an awful lot that you can perceive right now that you can work on. Because we get bothered by stupid stuff all the time, right? At least I do. Maybe I'm in worse shape than everybody else. But I get bothered by stuff all the time, so I have plenty of material. I don't need to go looking in the ninth circle of hell for some ego, because I've got a long list of stuff that's bothering me right now. And my ego likes to say, well, what's bothering me is this child and this spouse and this neighbor and this coworker, and I want to blame them. But really, all they're doing is acting as mirrors for my pride, my anger, my envy, my jealousy, my laziness. So when one of them does something that bothers me, instead of blaming them or reacting, I should say, thank you very much. You just gave me something that I need to work on. It's causing pain for me, and it's causing me to act in the wrong way towards everyone else. There's my material. It's right here, right now, in physical life. Now, sometimes you'll go deeper and find that you need to go deeper into those other realms, and that's why we need to awaken. But it seems to me that for most of us, we could probably work for many years just physically and find enormous volumes of content to work on. Any other question?
Would it be wise to consider the Bhavachakra as a necessary means for the divine to experience itself? As we move through these realms, ultimately gain sufficient wisdom and attain nirvana to fulfill some higher divine purpose? Or instead, do we consider the fact that we find ourselves on this wheel of suffering to be a mistake or a trap that we have somehow fallen into?
Okay. The question basically seems to me to ask, should we regard existence as the Bhavachakra as purposeful by the divine or accidental? Is all this for some reason, or is this some sort of trap? The reality is that everything that exists because of karma. Karma put everything into motion, and causes from the past have caused all of this to be. Whether the intentions were one way or the other is irrelevant. You cannot trace back to find an ultimate beginning, nor can you go forward to find an ultimate end. Everything continues and will always continue. The question is, what is our relationship to that? Do we continue to be a victim of our own mistaken actions? Or will we transcend the identification with self and replace that with compassion for others in order to escape the wheel and move this cosmic scenario to a higher vibration? It can be done, it has been done, it will be done. The question is, how many of us will do it, and how long will it take, and how much suffering will be experienced along the way? Existence is. Our relationship with existence can be changed. So I know there are a lot of theories about how things started and why, and is it a cosmic joke or is it a trap? It's irrelevant. We're suffering. The ones we love are suffering. There is a way to change it. Let's change it. Let's get off that wheel, and then we can understand those philosophical questions. As long as we're trapped in the cage, we can never understand the cage. As beautifully as it may be explained to us, as long as we're encaged, the explanation has no point. We have to get out of the cage. And we have to help our loved ones get out. And after that, we can debate. So if I get out of the cage, I'll wait there, and you guys can come and debate with me about philosophy. And if you get out first, you can help me out.
What is the Dayspring of Youth, and when will it next happen?
Okay, the Dayspring of Youth is, of course, the title of a book by the Master M. And it refers to a cosmic current that is in motion now in this cosmic scenario. It is the motion of the cosmic Christ. It is a great energy flowing in all of nature. It's always flowing in nature, but it has a flux and reflux just like every other force. It moves in waves. Right now, that force is very powerful. It's moving in a very strong way because of compassion for us. Because the suffering in our scenario is so intense. Not only that, because that Dayspring emerges from the heart of the Absolute itself and has all knowledge, it perceives that our suffering here is going to intensify. And it is making enormous effort to try to inspire us to awaken from the illusion and to incarnate its energy so we can help others. So the Dayspring of Youth is simply the cosmic Christ. Now, a bodhisattva is the only one who can incarnate that. All of the other beings talk about it. Even the demons talk about love. They talk about honor. They talk about dignity and truth. They even can talk about Christ. And the ones who separate themselves talk about it, and the nirvana Buddhas talk about Christ, and they talk about the Divine Mother. But none of them have sufficient purity or sufficient vessels to incarnate the energy of the Dayspring of Youth. That energy is the very root force of creation. In order for you to understand the nature of that force, just on a physical level, contemplate for just one moment what happens when we split an atom, the amount of energy that's released. A single atom. It's an enormous quantity of energy that emerges out of that atom. That is a Christic force. It is not the root of it, but it is related to it. And that's how much energy is in that atom. Well, your physicality, your vital body, your astral body, your mental body, your causal body are all made of atoms also. And all of those atoms have energy inside of them and convey energy. But they're all impure. So if you can imagine what would happen if an atom were made pure. Not like the impure physical atoms we have in the physical world. I mean, you see if you split a physical atom how much energy is released. But imagine if an atom were made pure. Made by Christ instead of made by mechanical nature. A perfect atom. How much energy would it have? How much more energy? An unthinkable amount. The causal, mental, and solar bodies are made from those atoms. Christic atoms. Those bodies can transmit magnitudes of order, more energy than any mechanical body can, like our psyche and our physicality. If that energy tried to pass through us, we would be completely obliterated. Much like what would happen if an atomic bomb were to explode here. There would be not a trace of us. That's how strong the Dayspring of Youth is. Now, that's at the beginning level that a bodhisattva creates the soul, the solar bodies, in order to receive that energy and give it to others through whatever mission that bodhisattva is pursuing. But the bodhisattva who first enters the straight path is very different from the bodhisattva who completes it. The bodhisattva who begins creates those bodies, but they are not perfect. And that bodhisattva still has all of their ego and all of their karma. They gradually work through the 10 bhumis, levels of becoming, which we call the second mountain. And in that process, they eliminate the entire ego, all of their mechanical residue, all of their karma. And at the end of that process, they die, they resurrect. And in that process, they create a body of liberation. It's an entirely new body that's far beyond the solar bodies, that's made entirely of crystic atoms, that has an incredible amount of power to transmit energy. They become a resurrected master, immortal, far beyond the wheel of becoming. They can transmit an unthinkable amount of energy. These are beings at the level of Krishna, Moses, Jesus. These levels, very high. But even at that level, there's more to go. They have to then establish Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya. Those are the bodies of the Buddha, the inner Buddha, which are even greater. All of that, level by level, is a process of managing the forces of the dayspring of youth to benefit others. It's a process in which that being becomes a more and more pure reflection of the dayspring, of the cosmic Christ. Less I, less self, more about you, and more about you, and more about you. More and more compassion, more and more light. The light that these beings transmit is painful to us. It's too bright. Any other question?
For a beginner in meditation that has not yet experienced reality, it seems very difficult to find anything to rely on if sensations and impressions are false and impermanent. Would it still be wrong to perhaps look for relief in experiences of the internal world, such as the astral plane? Are those internal impressions more truthful and reliable?
That's a very good question. The questioner is asking, since in meditation it's very difficult to find anything to rely on, such as impressions or cravings of sensations, is it more reliable to look for relief from suffering through experiences in the internal worlds or through experiences in meditation? It seems to me, from my experience, that this is what naturally happens to most meditators, is as we develop an understanding that we will not find satisfaction in the physical world and we want relief from that, we turn to meditation naturally, and we turn to prayer. This is natural. It's normal. We need it. It's important. The problem is that we can then transfer the egotistical reliance on physical sensations to an egotistical reliance on spiritual sensations. And this happens to most students. And it will inevitably result in suffering. If you believe that if you start to feel reliant on having astral experiences to have a relief from suffering, you will be disappointed. I guarantee it. Because you'll have an experience or two and you'll feel so happy, but then you won't have experiences for a while and you'll feel so disappointed. It's better to not rely on it. If they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. We have spiritual days and spiritual nights. Sometimes we have experiences, sometimes we don't have experiences. If you want to know how to find genuine relief from suffering and sustain yourself in the path, find your relief here and now by being awake, by remembering God, by being indifferent to success or failure, to pleasure or pain, to praise or to blame. Be indifferent. Remember your being. Pray to your God. Be here and now. In that, if you are sincerely remaining present and watchful, you will start to experience the true nature of the consciousness, which is, as Milarepa stated, naked and insubstantial, uncontrived, but bright, pure, happy. You will not need to seek in caffeine, in food, in companionship, in sexuality, in alcohol, in spiritual experiences, or in any other place for relief from suffering. You will only have to look into yourself here and now and relax. Simple as that. The antidote to suffering is nirvana, cessation of cycling, the cessation of craving. The very craving for relief is samsara. Let go of craving. Let go of seeking relief from suffering. Just be here and now, and you will relieve it. Simple as that. One of the scriptures, the name of the scripture is not coming to me. One of the scriptures of Buddhism states, as long as you have craving, you will have karma. Period. Craving for anything. Craving relief from suffering is a form of suffering. It's craving for something that you don't have. And usually we want that relief in the form of sensations. Maybe they're physical sensations, maybe emotional, maybe spiritual. But it's a kind of craving for something that we don't have. So you suffer. So there are many who read and study spirituality and who really want to experience God and really want to experience going the astral plane, so they suffer intensely. But it's suffering that they are creating for themselves. They didn't have that suffering before they read the book or before they heard the lecture, right? Before you hear about astral experiences, you don't suffer from craving for it. Isn't it true? You suffer from other things. But then you hear about awakening in the astral plane, you start suffering. Oh, I want that, I want that. You're creating it. By thinking about it, by dreaming about it, by imagining it, you're creating that suffering. So stop. Don't think about it. Don't crave it. Be here and now. Analyze your experience. Relax. From that simple shift in attitude comes the cessation of suffering. And it applies to everything. Observe yourself. You may find all of a sudden, you have to go to do an errand and you have to go to a place. Let's say you have to go to the bank. Oh, okay, give it a good example. Today, in this region, you need to put gas in your car. And the line is 8 blocks long because there's no gasoline. But you have to have gas. How are you going to feel? Very irritated. Very annoyed. Your mind's going to race. I got to find a way out of this. Maybe I can get somebody to do it for me. Right? But you're creating suffering. You get tense, you get anxious, you get angry, you get upset. Your pride is inflamed. Your anger is inflamed. You're envious of those who fill up their tank before the storm came. Instead, don't think about it. If you have to go, go. Do what you have to do. The thing is, what this form of psychology points out to us, and I can't emphasize this enough, most of our suffering is completely unnecessary. We create it. Most of it. We just create it all the time because we have the habit. If you can learn to shift your attitude, be here and now, be present, be patient, then a lot of that suffering will go away, and then you can deal with the more fundamental problems, the ones that are really at the root of the issue. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.